2024 is set to be a big year for weight loss drugs as Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly both prepared to release the latest developments for their products, including using them for more than just obesity. That could give these drugs the potential to be covered more broadly, such as by Medicare. And joining us right now is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He is former FDA Commissioner and a CNBC contributor. He also serves on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. And Dr. Gottlieb, first of all, good morning and welcome. Second of all, let's talk about what these drugs, for 2023, it was huge for these drugs. What are these new developments? What do you expect to hear?
Yeah, a lot of data is going to come out this year that's going to be important, I think, to building the thesis around these drugs. Analysts expect upwards of 14 million people to be on these medicines by 2030. That's about 5% of the population. Right now, you have about 2% of the population, less than 2%, on these medicines. And I think if you're going to see continued growth and fast growth, it's really going to turn on two trends that are going to start to unfold in greater magnitude this year. First, demonstration of success in preventing other comorbidities that are associated with weight gain, like dementia, like obstructive sleep apnea, cardiovascular disease, which we saw data on last year. And then just continued innovation in the pipeline. Follow-on products that both Novo and Lilly, as well as other companies, have in development right now that target different components of the GLP-1 pathway and different pathways in addition to GLP-1 that so far in early-stage trials have shown more substantial weight loss than the existing class of drugs, sometimes associated with fewer side effects. On the first point, Novo was really the first company, I think, to put out substantial data showing large risk in the reduction of cardiovascular outcomes, adverse cardiovascular outcomes like stroke and heart attack in patients with known cardiovascular disease. European and American regulators are reviewing that data right now for a proposed label expansion for the Novo's drug Wegovy. That should happen by June. That's going to be a major event, I think, in driving not just utilization of that drug, but also reimbursement. Lilly, for its part, has a number of trials underway, some of which are going to read out this year for its drug Zepbound, looking at things such as obstructive sleep apnea, where they're expecting data probably in the first quarter of this year, and in heart failure, where they're expecting data perhaps by the second quarter of this year. If those studies both come in positive, that's going to continue to build the thesis for using these drugs to reduce events and risks that are associated with weight gain.
Are these really miracle drugs? I mean, that sounds amazing if it plays out. Do you worry at all?
Well, look, I think a key question remains whether or not the mechanism of these drugs, which still isn't fully understood, is going to end up treating a broader range of conditions and chronic diseases as you achieve the weight gain associated with these drugs. There's a lot of metabolic imprinting that happens in adipose tissue, in fatty tissue, that groups are now starting to look at. And there is some belief that by reducing adipose tissue, you are resetting both the body's metabolic state as well as its inflammatory state, and that's driving some of these secondary benefits, the magnitude of some of these secondary benefits that you're seeing from the substantial weight loss that these drugs help induce. I think if that thesis continues to build, and again, there's going to be important data coming out this year, combined, both companies have about 15 trials underway looking at secondary benefits of these drugs in diseases that are associated with weight gain. If that data continues to come in positive, like the SELECT trial, which I think surprised people, the magnitude of the benefits seen in that trial, I think that's going to build an important thesis for the use of these drugs in a much broader range of conditions.
And Dr. Gottlieb, a lot of these secondary benefits clearly coming from just losing weight and building a case for insurance to cover more of these patients and more of the spending. Where are we at with how much insurance is covering? What are the qualifications, and how could that affect the growth of these drugs going forward?
Yeah, right now insurers are being difficult with coverage of these drugs. They're requiring prior authorization. A lot of them require concomitant use of other strategies to help reduce weight in association with these drugs. I think that's to put some burden on patients making choices about using these drugs. But the reality is that both companies are constrained right now by supply, and the expectation is that whatever supply comes onto the market is going to get used and going to get reimbursed as coverage continues to build through the decade. I think as you start to see trials come out like the SELECT trial showing a substantial risk of cardiovascular outcomes, adverse cardiovascular outcomes, in a largely well-treated population, that population was treated with statins and hypertension medications. As you start to see data like that come out, assuming these trials that are going to be due out this year continue to show that kind of positive trend, that's going to put pressure on insurers to cover this. You're going to see cardiologists wanting to prescribe this drug because it opens up a whole new way to try to reduce risk in patients. And I think ultimately Medicare is going to end up covering these drugs as well. Probably by 2027, 2028, it will require some intervention from Congress, most likely.
Scott, we're almost out of time, but very quickly, anything else we can look forward to in 2024? Because honestly, I'm sick of hearing about all of these weight loss drugs. I hope there's something else exciting being developed.
Yeah, look, there's going to be a lot of things coming out that are in pipelines right now. I think you're going to see continued advances with cell and gene therapies this year. There's a number of cell therapies that are being studied right now where FDA is going to make decisions. I think also continued recognition of the benefits of cell therapy in some autoimmune diseases like lupus. That could be a very big outcome.